My name's Seth, and this is What's Up, Germany. And this is a special edition with breaking news. Berlin's Christopher Street Day ended in a deadly attack Saturday night. A woman was killed and 16 other people were injured after a white vehicle was driven through people in Berlin's Tiergarten, the closing celebration for one of Europe's largest pride events. Police and prosecutors are now officially calling it what happened an attack. They are publicly searching for a 21-year-old suspect who may be armed and dangerous. And investigators are examining evidence that one or more people left the vehicle and that several victims were also injured with stabbing weapons. But the most important questions still remain unanswered. Police have not publicly established the motive. They have not confirmed whether the wanted suspect was the driver, and they have not determined publicly whether he acted alone. This is what we know, what remains unconfirmed, and what investigators will need to establish next. Before we begin, this is a rapidly developing story. This report is current as of about 12:45 Sunday, July 26th. I'm going to distinguish carefully between information confirmed by the police, information attributed to established news organizations, and claims that investigators have not yet verified. If a major development occurs after recording, I'll place it in the description and pinned comments and update the Tuesday episode. Confirmed facts are these. One woman was killed at the scene. 16 people were injured. 3 were reported in life-threatening conditions. 8 were seriously injured, and 5 had less severe injuries. Around 30 additional people received psychological emergency care after witnessing the attack. Berlin police and the General Prosecutor's office described the incident as an attack in the vicinity of Christopher Street Day. That language allows us to call it an attack. It does not, by itself, establish the motive or a final legal classification as terrorism. The attack happened shortly before 10 o'clock Saturday night in the southern part of Berlin's Tiergarten. According to police, a white vehicle entered the park and traveled along the Ehornsteig, a path running roughly parallel to Lennestrasse. It struck or knocked down people as it moved through the park and then collided with a tree. When police reached the vehicle, it was empty. Early statements referred to the driver fleeing. The official wanted notice now says that one or more people are believed to have left the vehicle after it stopped. The preliminary sequence is therefore, shortly before 10 p.m., the vehicle enters Tiergarten. People are struck along the Ehornsteig. The vehicle crashes into a tree, and one or more occupants leave the vehicle. Investigators also say several people appear to have been injured with stabbing weapons. Police are examining whether the attack had a second phase after the vehicle stopped, and whether the same person or additional people carried out those injuries. That sequence is not yet final. Witness accounts, forensic evidence, mobile phone recordings, surveillance footage, and data connected to the vehicle will be needed to establish who was inside, who was driving, and exactly what happened after the crash. It is important not to collapse those details into a cleaner story than the evidence currently supports. There may have been one attacker, there may have been more, we just don't know. The wanted suspect may have been driving, he may have been a passenger, or he may have played another role. Investigators have not yet publicly answered these questions. At roughly 10:15 p.m., the closing event at the Brandenburg Gate was interrupted and then evacuated. People were told to calmly leave and to avoid walking through the Tiergarten toward the Victory Column. This was not simply the end of the daytime march. Thousands of people were still gathered around the Brandenburg Gate for speeches, performances, and the final program. Organizers canceled the remainder of the celebration and later canceled Sunday's events connected to the Christopher Street Day. The emergency response involved around 150 personnel. Police searched the park extensively, including with thermal imaging equipment. By early Sunday, they no longer believed the suspect was still hiding in the Tiergarten and expanded the operations across the city. Police and prosecutors have publicly identified a 21-year-old suspect named Abdul B, as in boy. The official notice describes him as approximately 1.90 meters tall, with a slim build and black hair. He was last reported wearing a black hoodie and white trousers. Police warn the public not to approach him and say he may be armed and dangerous. Anyone who sees him should call 110 immediately. At the time I prepared this script, the suspect had not been publicly reported in custody. Police searched an address in Schöneberg during the night but did not find him there. Armed operations were also reported in transport stations as the search expanded across Berlin. Police are asking witnesses to provide photographs, video, and information through an official evidence portal. Because hundreds of thousands of people attended the Christopher Street Day, and many were recording, Investigators may have an enormous amount of visual evidence to examine. The suspect's background is already becoming a central part of the coverage, and this is where precise attribution matters the most. A Berlin police spokesperson said overnight that the suspect was known to police and associated with Berlin's Islamic milieu. Reuters also reported police describing him as part of the Islamic spectrum. RBB terrorism correspondent Holger Schmidt reports that the subject had previously faced proceedings connected to Section 89 of the German Criminal Code concerning preparation of a serious act of violence endangering the state. RBB reports that he had spent time in custody and had claimed contacts with the Islamic State terrorist organization. RBB also reports that the vehicle was rented in Brandenburg by the wanted suspect. Investigators have not, however, confirmed publicly that he was the person driving it during the attack. Those facts are highly relevant to the investigation. They still do not establish the motive for Saturday's attack. A person's previous associations, statements, or investigations can help authorities identify lines of inquiry, though. Motive requires evidence to this specific act. Planning, messages, searches, communications with other people, ideological material, a claim of responsibility, or statements made before or after the attack. Until investigators present the evidence, the responsible formulation is this: police are investigating a suspected association with the Islamic milieu, but the motive has not yet been officially determined. The timing and location make possible a hostility toward LGBTQ people, and the Christopher Street Day an obvious focus. Obvious is not the same as confirmed. We should not describe this as a proven anti-LGBTQ terrorist attack before investigators do. Saturday's attack came at the end of the 48th Berlin Christopher Street Day. Organizers expected hundreds of thousands of people for what they described as the largest Christopher Street Day weekend in the event's history. The 2026 model was Haltung ist hot. Taking a stand is hot. The event placed particular emphasis on democracy, social cohesion, and the approaching Berlin state election. It began with a new democracy program on Friday and continued with a major demonstration on Saturday. Christopher Street Day is both a celebration and a political demonstration. Its name refers to Christopher Street in New York, where the Stonewall Uprising began in 1969. Berlin's first CSD took place in 1979, and the event has grown into one of Europe's most visible demonstrations for LGBTQ rights. That context matters even before motive is concerned. Attack near the closing celebration of a pride demonstration strikes a gathering built around visibility. The idea that queer people should be able to live openly, assemble publicly, and claim the same safety in public space as anyone else. The attack therefore creates fear not only among the people who were there, but among people asking whether attending the next Pride, holding hands in public, or entering a queer venue will make them a target. Investigators must determine whether that fear reflects the attacker's intended purpose. Public institutions must respond to that fear regardless, because the practical effect is already real. The attack also occurred in a wider climate in which queer hostile crimes and disruptions of pride events have been increasing. In 2025, German authorities recorded 2,070 politically motivated crimes categorized under sexual orientation, including 284 violent offenses. They recorded another 1,294 crimes under gender-related diversity. Berlin police recorded 587 politically motivated cases in the combined categories of sexual orientation and gender-related diversity during 2025. 109 of those were violent offenses. Separately, the Amadeu Antonio Foundation documented 111 attacks or disruptions connected to Christopher Street Day events across Germany in 2025. The incidents included organized far-right counter-demonstrations, threats, online incitement, vandalism, and physical violence. The foundation describes its total as a minimum because not every incident is reported or becomes publicly known. These numbers do not establish who carried out Saturday's attack or why. They show why organizers and participants were already concerned about security before the attack occurred. They also show that threats to queer public life do not come with only one ideological direction. Far-right extremism, religious extremism, individual hatred, and other forms of violence can converge on the same target for different reasons. The investigation must identify the actual evidence in this case rather than using one threat to erase another. Saturday's attack will inevitably produce questions about how a vehicle entered a pedestrian area and whether the event could have been secured differently. Vehicles are difficult weapons to defend against because they are ordinary objects that can move quickly and cause mass casualties with very little preparation. Cities use concrete blocks, reinforced steel furniture, police vehicles, and temporary barriers to protect enclosed markets and event entrances. A demonstration spread across kilometers of public streets and a large open park present a different problem. Every access point cannot be treated as the entrance to a sealed venue. Emergency access must remain possible. Residents and workers may need routes through the area, and the event itself is designed to move through public space rather than withdraw from it. The relevant questions are specific. How did the vehicle enter the Ahornsteig? Was the access point protected? Did the vehicle bypass or remove any barrier? Was it using an authorized route? Were there earlier intelligence warnings connected to the suspect or the event? Those questions should be answered through the investigation, not through the automatic assumption that organizers or police failed. Berlin had a major security operation in place. The fact that an attack actually occurred means the system was penetrated. It does not yet tell us whether that penetration was reasonably preventable. In the next stage, investigators will attempt to answer 5 central questions. First, who was inside the vehicle? That requires forensic traces, rental records, surveillance footage, mobile phone data, and witness accounts. Second, who was driving? Renting a vehicle, being present in it, and driving it during an attack are different factual questions that must be proven separately. Third, was there a second attack phase involving knives or another stabbing weapon? Investigators will compare injuries, witness accounts, recovered weapons, and the movements of anyone seen leaving the vehicle. Fourth, did anyone else help plan, finance, or carry out the attack? Police are already leaving open the possibility of more than one person. Fifth, what was the motive? Investigators will examine communications, online activity, searches, contacts, statements, and any preparation connected to the location and date. Another important signal will be whether Germany's federal prosecutor general takes over the case. That office commonly assumes investigations involving suspected terrorism or attacks directed against the constitutional order. A takeover would be significant, but it would still represent an investigative assessment, not a final conviction or a complete account of motive. Until those questions are answered, the most accurate headline remains: deadly attack near Berlin's Christopher Street Day, a public search for a suspect associated with the Islamic milieu, and a motive that authorities have not yet confirmed. The hours after an attack create an information vacuum. Anonymous accounts fill it with mislabeled videos, invented casualty figures, false claims of responsibility, and confident declarations about motive before investigators have reconstructed the scene. That misinformation is not harmless. It can endanger people wrongly identified as suspects, intensify collective blame, re-traumatize victims, and make the eventual factual record harder to establish. We already know enough to report the seriousness of what happened. We do not need to invent certainty. We know that a woman was killed. We know that 16 people were physically injured and that 3 were initially in life-threatening condition. We know that a vehicle was driven through people and that investigators report stabbing injuries. We know that police are publicly searching for a suspect associated with the Islamist milieu. We do not yet know his precise role. We do not know whether he acted alone. We do not know whether the victims were selected specifically because they were connected to Christopher Street Day, and we do not yet know whether prosecutors will ultimately classify the attack as terrorism. These are not technicalities. They determine how the attack should be understood, who must be held responsible, and what measures might actually prevent another one. For the victims and their families, this is not primarily a debate about security policy, immigration, religion, or political messaging. It is a devastating act of violence. A woman went to central Berlin on a day when hundreds of thousands of people gathered peacefully, and she did not return home. 16 other people were taken to the hospitals. Many more witnessed something that will remain with them long after the police barriers are removed. Berlin's governing mayor, Kai Wegner, called it an attack on the city's free and open society. That freedom is not defended through speculation, collective blame, or attempts to minimize what happened. It is defended by establishing the facts and holding every person accountable, protecting communities that are threatened, and refusing to allow violence to decide who may gather openly in Berlin streets. I will continue following the investigation and will provide updates when police release confirmed information about the suspect, the motive, and the condition of the victims. Anyone with photos, video, or information connected to the attack should use the official Berlin evidence portal. Anyone who sees the wanted suspect should not approach him and should call 110 immediately, unless police have announced that the public search has ended. My thoughts are with the victims, their loved ones, and everyone caught up in what happened Saturday night. I'm Seth, and that's What's Up, Germany.